What you are about to see and hear is a panel discussion by four men instrumental in developing a special class for students at Garfield High School in Seattle. These students were unable to meet the requirements expected by the instructional staff. Within each school population exists a small minority of students who possess behavioral and learning problems not common to the administrative and instructional teams. Historically, the combination of these two factors, poor behavior and low academic performance, have generally led to expulsion from school. To better meet the needs of these students, this special class was developed during school hours. The panel members are Dr. Robert Fuller, member of the research staff of the Battelle Memorial Insta Youth Association, Mr. John Little, treasurer of the Central Area Youth Association, and Mr. Palmer Smith, Seattle attorney. Leading the discussion is Mr. Robert Bass, an employee of the Seattle Public Schools.
Dr. Fuller, you were the coordinator of this project. I wonder if you could tell us what you were trying to do.
Well, there are many students enrolled in Garfield High School and the other high schools of the city who are not attending classes. Some of them are cutting as much as 4 out of 5 of their classes. Some of them have been expelled from classes and are on the road to dropping out altogether. And the idea of the course that we ran this past year was to create for these students something which would be extremely interesting to them, something in which motivation would be no problem at all, and in which hopefully we could re-engage them in the learning process so that they would then return to their normal classes after a semester of this course. The idea is sort of that the students are walking tightropes in their regular courses, and periodically they fall off these tightropes, and we want to put underneath the tightropes a net. And our course was this net, so that rather than fall from the tightrope all the way onto the street as a dropout, they'd first be caught in this net and would have a chance to rediscover the excitement of learning by learning things which especially interested them to begin with. And having done this, would then return to the regular courses. The basic idea of the course was to derive the curriculum from student interests, to take up in any given week just what interests the students that week, to take up in any given hour or even minute what interested the students in that hour or minute, and to continually rederive the curriculum from student interests.
And Mr. Huey, what was your involvement?
My involvement was to help Dr. Fuller in teaching some of these classes. This is the first time that I've ever participated in anything to help dropouts. And I was so enthused with his results that I'm still looking for something to help.
Well, I first encountered the class through Mr. Huey, and it kind of sounded kind of far-fetched to me, because I felt that some of these youngsters, they was at the point of no return, and I couldn't imagine anybody even structuring a curriculum that would interest these youngsters. And to my surprise, I found this out.
My interest was being an amateur critic of education, as everybody is these days, and I decided that before I did much by way of criticism, I ought to really find out what was going on. I talked with Mrs. Virginia Bigelow, who's the head of volunteers, and she brought me in touch with Dr. Fuller. He needed assistance in the course, and I was able to arrange my schedule to give him that. And it proved to be one of the most memorable experiences of my life, I could say.
Obviously, you got some first-hand experiences as what the educator's trying to do with...
I much more appreciate the educator's job, too.
Dr. Fuller, you speak of curriculum, and yet you say they're going to fall off. But I thought I heard something about the unstructured aspects of it, that you would delve into the interest the child had at that given time, or on a weekly basis. does this involve a lot of preparation on the part of the staff members as they conduct such a program?
It involves preparation, I think no more than for a regular course. Often, however, the trick is that when you prepare a given subject, you go into class the next day and you find no one wants to hear about that subject. Some event may have occurred. Dr. Martin Luther King may have been assassinated, in which case they want to talk about that and the consequences of that. Louis Washkansky may have had a new heart transplanted into him, in which case they want to talk about that. So the thing you've prepared has to be put aside, and you have to take seriously the interest that you perceive before you right now, and take advantage of that interest to teach something which, when you teach it, will be totally understood and retained. The reason most students don't understand things when they don't is that they're not at all interested. They're not even listening. Once they listen, they do beautifully. Once they really want to know something. So this is the kind of thing we did.
As you worked with Mr. Smith, how do we get children to relate to the authority figure of teacher as they have related to you?
Well, anything to say?
I would say the question was, how do you get the teacher to relate to the youngster?
Okay, we'll reverse it.
Yeah, I think this is, personally, I think this is where the problem lies. In the teacher relating to the youngster. I kind of think the teacher expects the teacher to come and relate to him without showing him any warmth, any individual concern. Yeah, concern in a total classroom situation, but it's just normal. The thing you respond to, youngster respond to you if you respond to him. So now it seems to me, how do we get teachers to respond to the youngsters? And a youngster is going to respond to kindness. It's no.
They were very suspicious of both of us at first. All these youngsters were black youngsters, and we come in, and at first they thought that we were plainclothesmen. And eventually, after a few days of this theory, they decided that we were perhaps narcotics agents. And part of it, you know, was just fooling around with us, but part of it was a real suspicion. And we took them to see our places of work eventually. I'm a physicist, Palmer's an attorney. They saw where we worked. They got a sense of the kind of things we do and gradually came to realize that we were what we'd said we were.
We used films a great deal in this course. We did not rely much on the written word, writing things on the board too much, although we did some of that. And particularly, no written tests or anything of that sort. Instead, we used films. The amount of recall from films, and I think that perhaps this is to be expected now because these kids have been raised on television, but they get educated that way. And the amazing recall that some of them had of things presented in films, a tremendous grasp. They would ask to have the films rerun.
Yeah.
One time when we were teaching justice, I ran an interesting experiment in films. We run a film called the Oxbow Incident, which is about it's a famous Western story about a lynching. And we run that, and we got another film about a straight trial, more of a straight trial situation. We got two projectors in the room, ran the straight trial thing with the sound on, and then reran the Oxbow Incident at the same time, using in a limited degree the same thing that was used down here at the Eames Theater on that 7-panel screen that they have, you know, where you deliberately try to tax the eye. Now here the idea was different. You try to show them two stories at once, one of which they were already familiar with, and to get them to compare. And after the films were stopped, then we interrogated them. You know, what about this? What's different about the two films? What is due process? What's justice? What's fair? What happened in one and not in the other, and so on. And it worked. And they picked up the points very well.
More and more, I think I keep hearing that you're circumventing two aspects of, as educators, we all think about reading and writing. And that is saying, let's lean on the other skill and listening.
Right. And watching. We did just that because we wanted to start with the strengths of these students and let them experience some success, deal with their strengths. deal with their interests. We let them choose the movies we were going to show.
Right.
We let them lead the discussions of the films after they'd been shown.
Get them to question, get them to stand up and argue with you, which is, of course, a familiar thing to a lawyer. Get an argument going. And the other extraordinary thing about this is the tremendous rapidity of the exchange. They'll cover a subject in 5 minutes. Now, these are kids who are rejects from the system, dropouts. We had an exchange on the subject of capital punishment. It took about 4 minutes. One kid was kind of lying back, and all of a sudden he said, I don't think they should kill guys for crimes. And I said, why? And in about 5 of them, we just got going, and bing, bing, bing. It was like very fast ping pong. We had all the aspects of the capital punishment issue covered, including a concluding remark from one boy, nobody should play God.
Are there contradictions that would arise occasionally between the youngsters in the class where there would be just real disagreement?
Mm-hmm. We even at one point had a full-fledged chair fight occur in the classroom, with chairs like this sailing through the classroom.
Because chairs,
as two boys were picking on a third whose only defense was to escalate, and he started throwing chairs. But what happened? But I got to tell you what happened. What happened was the class realized this was really a dangerous escalation. This could lead to thermonuclear war and could lead to the destruction of the class. So the class itself collapsed in groups around all the participants in the battle and cooled it. And that was the end of this fight.
You managed that affair in your classroom. Would this be a typical response for the average educator when chairs start going across the room, when you're obviously responsible for the safety of other youngsters?
Well, you somehow have to induce the students to control it, because as one of the students said to me afterwards, he said, you never could have stopped that fight. We had to stop that fight. And he was right.
That's right.
So a great deal of discipline did come from the boys.
That's right.
That was the whole idea, was to induce self-discipline as a replacement for externally imposed discipline. Because once they get out of school, in hours other than from 9 to 3, there's no school discipline to help them. Unless they've got self-discipline, then from 3 to 9, you have nothing. So self-discipline's the only long-range answer.
This chair incident came about 3/4 of the way through the class, to give you some idea of the timing.
We have counselors, Mr. Hewitt. They talk to this teacher. Why can't they talk to the counselor?
Well, I think it's a different approach used. In Fuller's case and Palmer's case, they actually went to them and challenged them to help them teach, more or less. I think some of the teachers at Garfield had classes of 30, 34, which is really overcrowded. And I think maybe this is some of the...
and they only had one teacher, and we had
two teachers.
We couldn't have handled 30.
So I think this is probably some of the overcrowded classes in Dr. Fuller's class. And it should be
spillover from the overcrowded classes. That's right.
And as far as the guidance and counseling people are concerned, again, the same situation prevails. An overcrowded school, they've got a lot of those blue slips to take care of, and they tend to be just pushing. There are too many people. This slows down the clarity. They can't take time to stop and fix on the kid. That's why this home visit thing that Mr. Huey is starting is going to be of tremendous importance. Because the teacher will get a better idea of the full picture maybe surrounding a student, and then unusual behavior in the class will become completely comprehensible. And they'll know better how to discipline.
About those home visits, I'd like to point to one very concrete result of them. In the last 2 weeks before graduation at Garfield High School, 10 seniors had technicalities that otherwise would have prevented their graduation, had these technicalities removed as a result of these home visits. Because you discover some little thing that was going to prevent this youngster from graduating. Mr. Huey or Mr. Little then could take this little thing to the attention of the teacher in question, could get it worked out, and this led literally to the graduation of 10 youngsters who otherwise wouldn't have graduated, just due to a breakdown in communications between the schools and the homes. So the substitution of community liaison between school and homes is going to be a terrifically important thing.
Were the parents accepting of this program in your contacts? When you told them when we weren't necessarily going to stick with the fundamentals, reading, writing, arithmetic, biology, blah, 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 how did they feel about it?
The parents were concerned. Just like Dr. Fuller said, the kids have been playing a game. The students have been playing a game with the teacher and the parent. Just like if you send a student home with a note to give to his parent, a student 15, 16, 17 years old might not take that note home. So I think it's the school's responsibility, maybe not the school, let's say it's the community's responsibility for the parent to know what their children are doing in school.
I'd like to tell you one thing that occurred in this class, which I think is really central to the racial problems of our time, which Garfield so epitomizes. This is the basic question of black versus white, which was probably the subject implicitly of more of our discussions in that classroom than any other subject. We would start off, for example, with, is it better to be black or white? A question like that we might throw out. And we get the response, it's better to be white in America, it's better to be black in Africa. So then we might say, well, is it just because socially the adjustment is easier, or are there any other reasons why it's better to be black in one country and white in another? And they might not know about that, so we then we found a wonderful film which showed the white moths which lived on the birch trees outside of London before the turn of the century, before industrialization. It was obviously advantageous to be a white moth if you lived on a birch tree, because the eagles and the hawks couldn't see you, and you had protective coloration, and you survived better if you were white living on a birch tree. But what happened after industrialization, when all the smoke from all the chimneys came down and landed on those birch trees and gradually dyed their bark black? It became highly disadvantageous to be a white moth living on a darkened birch tree. And the white moths were selectively picked off by the hawks until the only remaining moths were darker skinned. So it became advantageous to be a darker moth and eventually a black moth living on a black birch tree. Then we collected up hundreds and thousands of these black moths from these blackened birch trees around London and took them up to Scotland, where there had been no industrialization. The birch trees were still white. They released these black moths, and the black moths flew to alight on their white birch trees. And of course they were picked off selectively by the hawks living up in Scotland. So it became very bad to be a black moth if you were living on a real white birch tree. And the lighter moths had the advantage, and they survived. And the black moths all died out. Within 4 or 5 moth generations, all the moths were white again. So then you come back to the problem, is it better to be a black man or a white man? And the students immediately sense it depends where you live. It depends what kind of tree you live on. It depends what country you live on. So then why is it better to be black if you live in Africa? And they sort of know the answer to this. They know that the sun isn't as dangerous. The sun doesn't affect you as much. If you have a terribly intense sunlight, you do better to be darker skinned because, for one thing, you don't sunburn and get this annoying sunburn. But in particular also, you don't get skin cancer. This is the real reason it's advantageous to be dark-skinned in Africa, is it's a protection against skin cancer, and it's well known that black-skinned people don't get skin cancer to the extent that white-skinned do. And the real question immediately occurs to everyone, why isn't everyone black? Why are there any white people at all? And the answer to that is very important to present to these kids, because I want them to respect me too. I tell them that when people migrated away from Africa and went up into Northern Europe, you have to have a lighter colored skin to get what little sunlight there is through your skin so it can create the vitamin D that prevents you from getting rickets. You get rickets, your legs won't run as fast, and you can't catch animals and you die. So you've got to have a lighter colored skin. It's just like animals in caves. All get light skin so they can absorb the little sunlight there is in that cave. Similarly, the white man results from that effect of radiation. So this gives the students a biological reason for their blackness. It gives me a biological reason for my whiteness. It shows the survival value of being black in one part of the world and white in another. Now that we all wear clothing, these advantages are no longer so important, but it shows where these differences arose from in the first place, and I think contributes to the racial pride of a student to know there's a darn good reason why he is as he is. It also, you see, is really a chunk of conventional curriculum but it's presented in a very relevant nutshell to the students. This is a nutshell version of the whole theory of natural selection, which a biology course takes a whole month or two to present. And within that little example of the moth and the humans, you've got the whole theory of natural selection in a nutshell, but it's a relevant nutshell.
As we delve with youngsters on some of these social issues, being white, did you ever feel uncomfortable?
Yes, I did. I often wished I was black, and then Huey would say, that's stupid. I shouldn't wish I was black. One of the most important byproducts of the class was for the students to learn to relate to a non-black man. And I have to agree that one of the most important values to me was to learn to relate to some non-white men.
I'd like to ask both of you this question. We have been talking about what it did for students. What did it do for you as a volunteer in the community?
Well, it gave me a great respect for these students as individuals, a great sense of the immense potentiality that's going to waste because they're not being caught. There are at least 4 kids in that class that are clearly college material, and they probably are not going to get there. And this is because of the whole, the whole history of 300 years, shall we say. The system should change and adapt so it doesn't write off a child like that. I mean, it seems to me that it's terrible if a child is written off like that, and the system must be changed.
How is it you're able to identify college potential? And here we're talking about 11th and 12th grade youngsters, and they haven't been detected in the first 10 years.
Well, just because of the natural intelligence. A kid that can participate and lay out the general argument on capital punishment, to me, is a learner in an intelligent way and so forth. I think this... And you can tell it by their verbal skills, some of them.
You could tell it by their enthusiasms, too. Enthusiastic people are never unintelligent. They always have something that's very important to say, and maybe something new that no one's said before, and they're having trouble saying it.
And this is the mystery of these things. Maybe, as I say, I have the lingering doubt about kids like this. They are strong enough to buck the system, to stand up, to create a problem and so forth. And yet the system is such that when they do that, they're broken out of it. But they should be the very ones who should be taken account of.
They're the tip of an iceberg, you see. Yeah. They're willing to lose their lives, in effect, their intellectual lives, on behalf of many other students who want to rebel but don't quite have the guts to rebel.
The more seriously, group we ought to be more seriously concerned about are the ones that John mentioned, the group that are just kind of going around
and not being educated.
Yeah. Well, the crucial question. Education is a very broad term. We circumvent both the reading and the writing.
Yes.
But as far as a vocational career, what are we going to do with these youngsters in terms of occupational categories?
Well, wait, they don't just stop at this level, though. This course is a selective tool. It is to hold them in rather than being bounced out where they will go beyond recapture. Then, hopefully, if they get self-discipline, they can come back in and start picking up skills till they get a broad range.
They return to reading and writing after a semester. Also, they read and write. A lot of them read beautifully. They read the autobiography of Malcolm X. They read books by Martin Luther King. They read wonderfully when they're reading something that concerns them. They read Arthur Miller's The Crucible.
Yeah, one kid had Arthur Miller's Crucible in his back pocket, a pocket edition of it. Well, that's pretty sophisticated.
I mean, I want to read boring textbooks, but I think the answer there is to work with respect to the interests they do have. Because once you've established an intellectual involvement in any area, it can transfer to other areas. The problem is to catch fire in some one area.
Yeah, I think, too, we have to take into account that these were seniors or juniors in high school. Now, if they had been caught in junior high, the problem wouldn't have been as great. And by the time they reach high school, they will have found themselves. This is the thing. I think that we as parents and as people in the community, we tend to stereotype. And we say, and we just kind of shut them off. And I found out in the home visit that the parent, when they have a child that's a problem child, and if you go to him to talk about his youngster in this atmosphere that he's a problem, well, then they get off, I don't know, they have some of a guilt complex. But the minute that they can understand that it's a whole lot of us with so-called problems, then they become more outgoing and they become more readily to help. And it's surprising, too, that how little that they know what actually goes on in the school. In one case, that one man was sending his youngster to school at 9 o'clock. He said he got him up in plenty of time so he could be there at 9 in school. He should have been at 8. So this is some of the communication that's lacking between the home and the school.
That's beating the system. Well, gentlemen, it's been very informative for me, and I want to thank each of you for your participation, and I do hope that the community that's viewing this program will find it useful and give us another perspective on what we're doing to approach youngsters with certain learning handicaps.
We've ended on the tone that it was very successful. Actually, there were lots of failures in this class. I just want to say that before we retire. There were 1/3 of our class was dropping out of the class for dropouts, in effect. We were replacing that third by some kids from other schools, but there was 1/3 we couldn't reach. And we didn't know what to do about it. Perhaps there are other techniques which would be better for that 1/3.
You did save some.
Maybe.
It's a worthy investment.
Maybe.
My thought is that you could go a long way in trying to devise new ways and resources to beat. But, I mean, I no longer accept the term dropout, really, I'm afraid. As long as a kid hasn't committed a serious criminal act or he's, committable to a mental institution, I think in one way or another he should be held in school and accommodated to. That there should not be any rejection. And I think that we should go a long way, and that we'll actually save ourselves in many, many other fields. When these people grow up and later on in life, you're saving lots of problems by catching them young at the school. This is true. No question about it. It just makes good sense.
I had thought that if I could name this class, I would name the class the Teachers That Cared. And I think that this was the prime result of the classes. And he's kind of pessimistic, but I know that he saved. I know that he saved some.
As a member of the Corps, I certainly hope that all teachers care and can convey this to each and every youngster.
Yes.
And let's face it, we all have our frailties in terms of relation to various individuals that we're confronting each day.
There be a number of teachers at Garfield who could carry on such classes just marvelously. I think sometimes there's a question of the teacher feeling he doesn't have the freedom to deviate from the curriculum. But once given the freedom by the principal or by the school system making such a decision that where it's important to deviate from the curriculum, one has full freedom to do so. A lot of the teachers could make use of some of these techniques.
Are we really saying go away from the curriculum?
No.
Are you saying change your approaches?
That's more
to
it.
teaching curriculum content?
That's it.
That's right.
Present the same curriculum. After all, the curriculum is important.
Oh.
It's been proven over centuries. It's what we need to know to live well and survive and earn money. But there are different patterns of presentation of that old curriculum. There are probably going to be as many patterns of presentation as there are people. What we're trying to do is propose one alternative pattern of presentation, namely the pattern that runs like this, where you just start and follow student interest and cycle back over subjects and wander wherever that student interest takes you, just like soccer players following a soccer ball over a soccer field. We're saying that's another pattern. There are probably many more patterns. We missed 1/3 of our class. They would cut or they'd be bored, and we didn't know how to reach them. We take the point of view that when a student's bored, it's the teacher's fault. It's always that way. You can deduce it.
The teacher's a professional, and the teacher, as a professional, should have a choice of methods. And if one thing doesn't seem to be working, he should be able to shift over. And he should be given that flexibility and freedom. He should be treated like a professional.
Is it your feeling that among the staff members they did not have this freedom of approach in classrooms?
To some extent.
From your own observations?
I mean, a biology teacher generally feels he must stick with biology and feels it's a little awkward to go into social problems or into drug problems. But I think it should become more the rule than the exception that one deviates from the curriculum if one finds student interests are very heavily outside it on a given day.
My understanding is that some of the strong teachers in Garfield, for example, and elsewhere, do just this. They don't feel bound, but they cover the curriculum over the whole time. But they do a great deal of what we were doing. I mean, this is no great new discovery.
It's 2,000 years old, in fact. Socrates used the same method.
Suppose on Tuesday, the children come to the classroom. No one really has a spark. Who generates this spark for discussion or content for that period?
This happened, too.
Sure.
And sometimes no one would succeed in generating that spark. And a couple of days, there was no one could generate a spark, so we just took the class over to the gymnasium and played basketball for a whole period. We did this on several days. We realized we should have done it very early in the class because it's important for the teachers to do something which the students are as good or better at than the teachers. So usually the teacher's always better at everything. It's important to show that you're willing to play a game in which they're better. And but some days no spark was ever lit, and other days one would light one by asking them a provocative question.
And the whole thing would just go off.
Like it's a better
roll out of bonfire. Like a bonfire for the whole hour. But other times it would be dead. It's like fishing. Sometimes it's hot, and then other times it isn't hot.
Yeah.
And
I was putting myself in that spot, always being prepared for.
You have to tolerate, for the longer objective, a considerable amount of disorganization. As Bob says, you have to defer, the teacher has to defer gratification in order to give the students gratification so that their questions may be answered immediately.
But didn't to bring this discussion to a halt, but time prohibits. I want to thank each of you for your participation. It's been very informative for me, and I hope the viewing audience feels the same. Thank you.
Leading the discussion was Mr. Robert Bass, an employee of the Seattle Public Schools. His guests were Dr. Robert Fuller, member of the research staff of the Battelle Memorial Institute Seattle Research Center, and now Dean of Faculty at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, Mr. Charles Huey, President of the Central Area Youth Association, Mr. John Little, Treasurer of the Central Area Youth Association, and Mr. Palmer Smith, Seattle Attorney. This program was produced at KCTS-TV Seattle in cooperation with the Battelle Memorial Institute and the Seattle Public Schools.